Struggling to stay motivated past noon? You're not alone. And it's not a willpower problem, it's a brain problem. In this video, we're diving deep into the fascinating neuroscience of sustained motivation, revealing how your brain works against you, and, more importantly, how you can rewire it for consistent focus and unstoppable drive. The power of dopamine, your brain's reward system. Motivation is often misunderstood as a mysterious inner force that some people are born with and others are not. But the truth is, there's a science to it. And at the heart of this science is a remarkable chemical in your brain called dopamine. Known as the motivation molecule, dopamine is not just about feeling good when you achieve something. Its real magic lies in what happens before you reach your goal. It's about anticipation. It's about the thrill of progress. It's about your brain lighting up at the thought that you are moving towards something meaningful. When you set a goal, no matter how big or small, your brain begins to release dopamine not when you succeed, but when you take steps towards success. This is why people often feel more excited during the journey than at the finish line. Think about how you feel in the moments leading up to a big event you've been looking forward to. That rush, that energy, that focus, that's dopamine at work. It's your brain's way of saying, keep going, you're getting closer. The problem many people face is that they set overwhelming goals and only expect to feel good when those goals are complete. This creates a dangerous gap, a long stretch of time where there's no sense of reward, no hit of dopamine, and motivation starts to fade. The brain isn't built to wait endlessly for a payoff. That's why scientists have found that breaking goals into smaller, achievable steps is one of the most powerful ways to maintain daily motivation. Every time you check off one of these smaller steps, your brain releases dopamine, reinforcing the desire to keep moving forward. For example, imagine you want to write a book. If you only think about the end goal, it can feel overwhelming and demotivating. But if you break it down into writing just some by words a day, and you celebrate each writing session, you're giving your brain a constant stream of rewards. That's the fuel that keeps you coming back day after day. Another key point is that dopamine thrives on novelty and progress. This is why starting something new often feels so exciting. Your brain is flooded with dopamine because it's encountering fresh challenges and possibilities. But as the novelty wears off, many people mistakenly believe their motivation has died. In reality, they've simply stopped giving their brain reasons to feel rewarded. The solution? Keep finding ways to measure progress and inject variety into your daily actions. Change your approach, set mini challenges, and track your improvements. One of the most fascinating findings in neuroscience is that dopamine is tied more to the pursuit of the goal than the actual reward. In other words, your brain is wired to enjoy the chase. This means motivation isn't something you wait for. It's something you generate by consistently moving towards something that matters to you. Even tiny actions can trigger that upward spiral. It's also important to remember that dopamine can be hijacked by instant gratification activities. Social media scrolling, junk food, binge watching, which give short, shallow bursts of reward without real progress. Over time, this can dull your brain's natural drive to work toward meaningful goals. The good news is that your dopamine system is trainable. By consciously choosing to reward yourself for productive, growth-oriented actions, you strengthen the link between effort and pleasure. Daily motivation, then, is not about waking up every morning and hoping you feel like it. It's about designing your environment and your goals in a way that naturally feeds your brain consistent hits. That's why habits like tracking progress, celebrating small wins, and breaking big goals into manageable parts aren't just productivity hacks. They're brain chemistry strategies. When you understand this, you stop relying on luck or fleeting bursts of willpower. You start creating a self-sustaining loop. Take action, feel rewarded, want to take more action. It becomes less about forcing yourself to work and more about building a life where progress is addictive in the best possible way. And once that loop is in motion, the need to constantly get motivated fades because motivation becomes a natural byproduct of your daily actions. The habit loop turning effort into autopilot. One of the biggest reasons people struggle to stay motivated every day is because they think motivation has to be a constant feeling. They believe they must wake up inspired, energetic, and full of drive before they can take action. But science shows that this approach is backwards. You don't need to feel motivated to take action. You need to take action to create motivation. And the best way to ensure you take action, even when you don't feel like it, is to turn your desired behaviors into habits. At the center of this transformation is something psychologists call the habit loop. It's a three-part cycle that governs much of our daily behavior: routine, reward. This loop is how your brain learns to run actions on autopilot. When you understand it, you can use it to replace unhelpful behaviors with ones that push you closer to your goals without needing constant bursts of willpower. The first part of the loop is the cue. A cue is a trigger that tells your brain it's time to do this now. It can be a time of day, a place, a feeling, or even an action you've just taken. For example, seeing your running shoes by the door can be a cue to go for a jog. Sitting at your desk in the morning can be a cue to start writing. The key is to make your cues obvious and consistent so your brain knows exactly what comes next. The second part of the loop is the routine, the behavior itself. This is the action you want to become automatic. At first, this routine requires conscious effort, and it may feel uncomfortable or awkward. But the more often you repeat it in response to the same cue, the less mental energy it takes. Over time, your brain wires that behavior in as the default response to the cue. The final part of the loop is the reward. This is where your brain gets the payoff. A reward doesn't have to be big. It just needs to be satisfying, enough to signal to your brain that this behavior is worth repeating. It could be the endorphin rush after exercise, the satisfaction of checking something off your list, or a short break after focus work. Rewards are critical because they release dopamine, which strengthens the connection between the cue and the routine, making it more likely you'll do it again. When you intentionally build habits using the habit loop, you create a system where motivation is no longer the deciding factor in whether or not you act. Think about brushing your teeth. You don't need to give yourself a pep talk or watch an inspirational video to do it. You just do it because it's become part of your identity and daily rhythm. That's the power of the habit loop. It removes decision fatigue and emotional resistance. Many people make the mistake of trying to overhaul their entire life overnight, creating a long list of new habits to adopt. But the brain responds best to gradual change. Start with one habit. Pick a clear cue, define a simple routine, and decide on a meaningful reward. Repeat that loop consistently until it becomes automatic. Then layer in the next habit. One fascinating aspect of the habit loop is that it works in reverse too. It's the same process your brain uses to maintain unhelpful habits. This is why breaking bad habits isn't just about stopping the behavior. You have to identify the cue and reward driving it, and then replace the routine with something more productive. The beauty of habit science is that once a positive habit is established, it doesn't require the same emotional energy to maintain. It runs quietly in the background of your life, freeing up mental bandwidth for bigger challenges. And as these small, automated actions stack up, they create a foundation of consistency that keeps your momentum alive even during times when motivation feels low. When motivation is built into your habits, you're no longer chasing a feeling, you're living in a structure that naturally pulls you forward. Instead of asking yourself every day, do I feel like doing this? You simply do it because it's what you do. That's the difference between relying on willpower and relying on the habit loop. One fades quickly, the other lasts for years. Neuroplasticity, rewiring your mind for persistence. Now, your brain is not a fixed machine with unchangeable wiring. It's a living, evolving network capable of growth and adaptation throughout your entire life. This ability is known as neuroplasticity, the brain's capacity to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections in response to repeated thoughts. Understanding neuroplasticity is like having the blueprint for building mental strength because it explains how persistence can be trained into your very biology. Every time you take action, whether you're learning a new skill, practicing self-discipline, or pushing through a challenge, you're sending signals through specific neural pathways. At first, those pathways are weak, like faint trails in a forest. But the more you travel those trails, the more solid and defined they become. Over time, they transform into well-paved roads that your brain travels without hesitation. This is how habits, skills, and resilience are built at a biological level. The reverse is also true. If you avoid challenges, give up quickly, or indulge in negative self-talk, you're reinforcing a different set of pathways, the ones that make quitting easier and effort feel harder. Your brain adapts to whatever you repeatedly do. The encouraging truth here is that no matter where you start, you can change your brain by changing your actions and thoughts. Persistence is not just a personality trait. It's a neural pattern that can be strengthened with practice. One of the most important findings in neuroscience is that struggle is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of growth. When you attempt something difficult, your brain initially fires up in unfamiliar ways. It's working harder, trying to process and adapt. This discomfort can feel frustrating, and it's often the point where many people quit. But in reality, these are the moments when your brain is actively rewiring itself. Neuroplasticity thrives under challenge because the brain responds to difficulty by forming new connections to handle it better in the future. Think of it like building muscle at the gym. Lifting a weight that's too light won't cause your muscles to grow. It's the resistance that triggers change. Similarly, your brain needs resistance, new skills to learn, obstacles to overcome, problems to solve, to expand its capabilities. Each time you persist through these moments, you're essentially training your brain to expect and handle challenges more effectively. Another fascinating aspect of neuroplasticity is the role of repetition. Just as a single workout won't transform your body, a single moment of effort won't rewire your brain. Consistency is the key. Every repetition strengthens the pathway, making it easier and more natural over time. This is why deliberate daily actions, even if small, are so powerful for long-term change. You're not just doing the task, you're shaping the architecture of your mind to make that task easier tomorrow. Mindset plays a huge role in this process. Studies have shown that believing you can improve, adopting what's called a growth mindset, actually increases neuroplasticity. When you view challenges as opportunities to learn rather than as threats to your abilities, your brain stays more open to forming new connections. This openness accelerates learning, resilience, and persistence. Neuroplasticity also works in synergy with emotional regulation. When you face setbacks, your emotional response can determine whether you reinforce a quitting habit or a persistence habit. Training yourself to stay calm under pressure, to reframe failure as feedback, and to focus on the next step keeps your brain in a growth-oriented state. Over time, this makes persistence feel more natural and less exhausting. The power of neuroplasticity is that it turns persistence into more than just a temporary effort. It transforms it into a default setting. Once your brain has been rewired to associate effort with progress and challenges with opportunity, you don't have to constantly convince yourself to keep going. Your mind has been trained to expect that progress comes through sustained effort, and so continuing becomes the automatic choice. When you understand that your brain is constantly reshaping itself based on what you feed it, your thoughts, your actions, your habits, you realize that persistence isn't just about pushing harder. It's about deliberately giving your brain the experiences it needs to make persistence your natural response to life. The energy-motivation connection fuel your body, fuel your mind. Motivation isn't just a mental phenomenon. It's deeply tied to your physical state. You can have the clearest goals, the most inspiring vision, and the best intentions, but if your body is running on empty, your mind will struggle. Keep up. Science has shown that your physical health directly impacts the brain chemistry responsible for focus, drive, and sustained effort. In other words, how you treat your body determines how much fuel your mind has for motivation. At the core of this connection are neurotransmitters, chemical messengers like dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine. These aren't just mood shapers. They are key players in motivation, and the raw materials your brain needs to produce them come from the food you eat, the quality of your sleep, and the way you move your body. When you give your brain the nutrients and rest it needs, you create the ideal internal environment for motivation to thrive. Let's start with nutrition. Your brain uses about 500 hours of your body's total energy, even though it makes up only about 500 hours of your weight. This energy comes from glucose, derived from the food you consume. The quality of that food matters enormously. A diet rich in whole foods, lean proteins, healthy fats, and complex carbohydrates provides a steady stream of energy, keeping your blood sugar stable and preventing the crashes that can drain your focus and drive. Foods high in omega-6 fatty acids, like salmon, walnuts, and chia seeds, support brain cell communication. Leafy greens, berries, and colorful vegetables are packed with antioxidants that protect brain function. When you consistently feed your body nutrient-rich foods, you're essentially fueling your motivation engine. Next, there's exercise. Physical activity does far more than shape your body. It transforms your brain. Exercise increases blood flow, delivering oxygen and nutrients to brain cells while promoting the growth of new neural connections. It stimulates the release of dopamine and endorphins, both of which create a sense of reward and optimism that fuels daily motivation. So even short bursts of movement, a brisk walk, a set of push-ups, or stretching can elevate your mental energy. Over time, regular exercise strengthens not only your muscles, but also your mental resilience, making it easier to stay consistent in your goals. Sleep is another pillar of the energy motivation connection, yet it's often the most neglected. While you sleep, your brain is busy consolidating memories, processing emotions, and repairing cells. Inadequate sleep disrupts the balance of neurotransmitters, reduces your ability to focus, and increases stress hormones like cortisol, all of which drain motivation. Consistently getting 22 hours of quality sleep is like recharging your mental battery each night, ensuring you wake up with the clarity and energy to tackle your goals. Hydration also plays a surprisingly important role. Even mild dehydration can cause fatigue, poor concentration, and mood dips, subtle drains on motivation that most people overlook. Your brain is about fight, and keeping it well hydrated supports optimal functioning of neurons and the efficient transmission of signals that keep you sharp and driven. The relationship between energy and motivation is cyclical. When you fuel your body well, you feel more motivated. When you act on that motivation and achieve progress, you feel energized. This upward spiral can work powerfully in your favor, but the reverse can also be true. Poor physical habits can lead to low energy, which reduces motivation, which in turn leads to inactivity and further energy decline. The key is to interrupt the downward spiral and deliberately cultivate an upward one by prioritizing your physical well-being. Small, consistent actions are often more sustainable than dramatic overhauls. Swapping processed snacks for whole fruits, adding a daily minute walk, drinking more water, and setting a regular bedtime might seem simple, but these actions create a strong foundation for mental performance. Over time, these physical habits compound into a stable, high-energy state that naturally supports motivation. Your mind is not separate from your body. It's part of the same system. Treating your physical health as a priority isn't just about living longer, it's about performing better, thinking clearer, and feeling more driven every single day. When it operates at its best, your mind can sustain the motivation needed to chase goals with persistence and passion. Sustained daily motivation is not a mystery reserved for the lucky or the naturally driven. It is the result of understanding and working with how the human brain and body are designed. The science is clear. Motivation thrives when we feed it consistently, not when we wait for it to magically appear. Dopamine teaches us that progress, not just achievement, is what fuels our drive. By setting small, measurable goals and celebrating each win, we create a constant loop of reward that keeps us moving forward. The habit loop shows us that we don't have to depend on willpower alone. We can train our behaviors to run on autopilot, making action the default rather than the exception. Neuroplasticity reveals that persistence is a skill we can wire into our very biology, strengthening our brain's ability to embrace challenge and growth over time. And the energy-motivation connection reminds us that our mental drive is inseparable from our physical health. The better we care for our body, the more powerful our mind becomes. And when we combine these principles, we stop chasing fleeting bursts of inspiration and instead build a life where motivation is a natural, renewable resource. We learn to design our environment, our habits, and our mindset in ways that make progress inevitable. And in doing so, we turn daily action into a science-backed formula for long-term success. The truth is, you don't have to feel motivated every single day. You just need to create the conditions where motivation has no choice but to show up. When you apply the science, the spark you're looking for won't just light up your path. It will keep the fire burning for years to come.